She was a tech billionaire with a broken Ferrari on a dusty back road. He was a single dad with grease under his fingernails and a heart that had given up on fairy tales. When Margot Davies stepped out of her smoking supercar in the middle of nowhere, she expected to call for help and wait. What she didn't expect was Finn Green, a man who could fix more than just engines, who saw past her designer clothes to the loneliness she'd been hiding behind success. But this isn't just a story about a roadside rescue. It's about two broken people finding healing in the most unexpected place, about how one act of kindness can shatter every wall you've built around your heart. Because when Finn looked into Margot's eyes after saving her day, something shifted, something so powerful that by sunset, she would ask him a question that would change both their lives forever. This is a story about taking the biggest risk of all, choosing love over logic, heart over fear. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a canvas of red rock and stubborn sagebrush, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Highway 93 cut through this wilderness like a scar, mostly empty except for the occasional truck hauling supplies to Las Vegas or lost tourists taking the scenic route to nowhere. Margot Davies had been driving for 3 hours straight, her sleek black Ferrari 488 GTB purring through the desert heat like a predator on the hunt. She'd left Silicon Valley before dawn, needing to escape the suffocating walls of boardrooms and the endless parade of investors who saw dollar signs when they looked at her instead of the woman who'd built Cloud Vault Technologies from a cramped garage into a billion-dollar empire. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was running away in a car worth more than most people's houses. But Margot had learned long ago that money couldn't buy the one thing she actually wanted: peace. Her phone had been buzzing incessantly for the past hour. Her assistant, her board members, reporters wanting quotes about the latest acquisition. But she turned it face down and pressed harder on the accelerator. That's when the engine started, making a sound that no Ferrari should ever make. It began as a subtle whine, barely audible over the roar of the wind through her open windows. But within minutes, it had escalated to a grinding metal-on-metal screech that made her stomach drop. Steam began billowing from under the hood, and the temperature gauge needle swung into the red zone like a thermometer in hell. "No, no, no," Margot muttered, easing off the gas and scanning the horizon for any sign of civilization. Miles of nothing stretched before her, broken only by the occasional Joshua tree standing sentinel against the emptiness. Her phone showed no bars. Of course it didn't. She was quite literally in the middle of nowhere with a $250,000 paperweight. The Ferrari coasted to a stop beside a weather-beaten sign that read, "Copper Creek, 2 miles," with an arrow pointing down a dirt road that looked like it hadn't seen maintenance since the Carter administration. Margot sat in the sudden silence, the only sounds the ticking of cooling metal and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. She stepped out into the blazing heat, her designer heels, immediately sinking into the sandy shoulder of the road. Steam hissed from under the hood like an angry snake, and she could smell the acrid scent of overheated coolant and burning oil. Her silk blouse, perfectly pressed that morning in her penthouse suite, now clung to her back with perspiration. This was exactly the kind of situation her wealth was supposed to protect her from. She had people, assistants, drivers, mechanics on speed dial, but none of that mattered when you were stranded in the Nevada desert with no cell service and a car that had just committed very expensive suicide. Margot was contemplating her limited options when she heard the rumble of an approaching engine. A dusty pickup truck appeared on the horizon, moving at a leisurely pace that suggested its driver wasn't in any particular hurry to get anywhere. As it drew closer, She could make out the faded blue paint and the collection of tools rattling. In the bed, the truck slowed and pulled over behind her Ferrari, and Margot found herself holding her breath. She'd heard enough horror stories about stranded women and good Samaritans with bad intentions. Her hand instinctively moved to the pepper spray in her purse. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed a trim and clothes that spoke of honest work rather than boardroom meetings. His jeans were faded but clean, his t-shirt stretched over broad shoulders, and his boots were scuffed from actual use rather than fashion. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, completely unbothered by the desert heat that was making Margot feel like she was slowly melting. "Afternoon," he said, his voice carrying a slight drawl that wasn't quite Texan, but suggested roots somewhere in the south. "Looks like you're having some car trouble." Margot found herself staring into eyes the color of storm clouds, intelligent and kind without being presumptuous. There was something about his presence that immediately put her at ease. Not because he seemed harmless, but because he seemed genuinely decent. "That's putting it mildly," she replied, gesturing toward the still steaming Ferrari. "I think it might be dead." He walked over to her car, and Margot noticed he moved with purpose, like a man who knew his way around mechanical problems. He popped the hood and peered inside, his expression shifting from casual interest to professional assessment. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, already rolling up his sleeves. "Please," Margot said, surprised by the relief in her own voice. "I'm Margot, by the way." "Finn," he replied, leaning over the engine. "Finn Green." For the next 15 minutes, Margot watched as Finn diagnosed her Ferrari with the methodical precision of a surgeon. He checked fluids, tested belts, and examined connections with hands that clearly knew their way around an engine bay. His movements were economical and confident, and Margot found herself oddly mesmerized by the sight of someone who actually knew how to fix things rather than just write checks to make problems disappear. "Well," Finn said finally, straightening up and wiping his hands on a rag that had appeared from his pocket, "the good news is it's not catastrophic. The bad news is you've got a blown radiator hose and your cooling system is compromised. She's not going anywhere under her own power." Margot's heart sank. "How long to fix it?" "Depends on whether I can find the right parts. This isn't exactly the kind of car we see much of in Copper Creek." "We?" Finn smiled, and Margot felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the desert heat. "I run a garage in town. Nothing fancy, but I can usually get most things running again." He looked at her, standing there in her silk and designer heels, clearly out of place in the middle of nowhere. And his expression softened with what looked like genuine concern rather than pity. "Tell you what," he said. "Let me give you a ride into town. We can figure out what to do about your car once we get you somewhere with air conditioning and cold water. This heat isn't safe for anyone to be standing around in." Margot hesitated, every instinct honed by years of corporate maneuvering and urban caution told her not to get into a stranger's truck in the middle of the desert. But something about Finn Green, the steady way he looked at her, the complete absence of calculation in his offer, made her decision easy. "That would be incredibly kind," she said. "Thank you." As Finn helped her gather her belongings from the Ferrari, Margot caught herself watching the way his hands moved, careful and sure. When he offered her his arm to help her navigate the sandy ground in her impractical shoes, she noticed he smelled like honest work and something clean, soap maybe, or just sun and wind. "Don't worry about your car," he said as they walked toward his truck. "It'll be safe here. Nobody's going to bother a Ferrari in the middle of nowhere. Where would they take it?" Margot laughed despite herself and realized it was the first genuine laugh she'd had in weeks. As Finn opened the passenger door of his truck for her, she found herself looking forward to seeing what Copper Creek had to offer and wondering what other surprises this unexpected detour might hold. Little did she know that climbing into Finn Green's dusty pickup truck would be the decision that changed everything. The drive to Copper Creek took them down a winding dirt road that seemed to exist more as a suggestion than an actual thoroughfare. Finn's truck handled the rutted path with the ease of long familiarity, while Margot found herself gripping the door handle as they bounced over rocks and through sandy washes that would have swallowed her Ferrari whole. "Sorry about the rough ride," Finn said, navigating around a particularly large boulder. "The county keeps promising to pave this road, but that's been the same promise for about 15 years now." "How long have you lived here?" Margot asked, genuinely curious. The landscape was beautiful in its harsh way, but it seemed like the last place someone would choose to build a life. "All my life," Finn replied. "Well, except for a few years when I thought I needed to see what else was out there. Turns out everything I needed was right here." There was something in his voice, not regret exactly, but a story left untold. Before Margot could probe deeper, they crested a small hill and Copper Creek spread out below them like a mirage. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The town was smaller than Margot had expected, maybe 24 buildings clustered around. A main street that looked like it hadn't changed much since the 1950s. There was a diner with a neon sign that flickered between open and ope, a general store with wooden steps that sagged in the middle, and what appeared to be a combination, post office and ice cream parlor. Everything was painted in faded pastels that had been bleached by decades of desert sun, but it was Finn's garage that caught Margot's attention. Set back from the main street, Green's Automotive was housed in a building that looked like it had been constructed from spare parts and determination. The structure was part corrugated metal, part wood siding, and part creative engineering. A hand-painted sign hung crooked over the main bay, and the parking area was packed dirt-worn smooth by years of foot traffic. What surprised Margot wasn't the modest appearance of the place. She'd expected that. What surprised her was the obvious care that had gone into it. The tools visible through the open bay doors were old but meticulously maintained. The work area, while clearly used, was organized with the precision of someone who took pride in their craft. And everywhere she looked, there were small touches that spoke of attention to detail: flower boxes under the office windows, a carefully swept walkway, a hand-carved wooden sign that read, "All welcome." "It's not much to look at," Finn said, following her gaze, "but she runs honest." "Runs honest?" Margot asked. "My grandfather's saying means it does what it's supposed to do, the way it's supposed to do it, without any unnecessary complications." Finn parked the truck and came around to help Margot down. As her feet touched the ground, a voice called out from the garage. "Dad, you're back early. Did you find the parts for Mrs. Chen's?" The voice stopped abruptly as a teenage boy appeared in the doorway and spotted Margot. The boy was clearly Finn's son. The same storm-grey eyes, the same easy way of moving, though his hair was a shade lighter and stuck up at angles that suggested a recent encounter with motor oil. He wore coveralls that were too big for his frame and boots that had seen more work than most adults' shoes. "Ethan, come meet our guest," Finn said. "This is Margot. Her car broke down out on 93. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag and approached, with the kind of confidence that seemed to run in the Green family. "Nice to meet you, Mom. Dad, is that a Ferrari out there? Because Tommy Hernandez is driving by about every 5 minutes trying to get a look at it." "It is," Margot said, amused by the boy's directness. "Though it's not much of a Ferrari at the moment." "What's wrong with it?" Ethan asked, his interest clearly genuine rather than polite. "Blown radiator hose, compromised cooling system," Finn answered. "Going to need to order parts from Vegas, probably." Ethan's face lit up. "Can I help fix it? I've never worked on anything that nice before." "We'll see," Finn said, but there was warmth in his voice. "First, let's get Margot somewhere she can cool off and figure out what she wants to do." The inside of the garage office was a study in organized chaos. The walls were covered with calendars from parts suppliers, photos of classic cars, and what appeared to be a collection of thank you notes from satisfied customers. The desk was buried under invoices and repair manuals, but everything seemed to have its place in a system that made sense to someone. What caught Margot's eye, however, was a framed photo sitting prominently on the desk. It showed Finn and Ethan standing next to a restored 1967 Mustang, both grinning with the satisfaction of a job well done. But there was something about the way the photo was positioned, turned slightly so that anyone sitting across from the desk could see it clearly, that suggested it held special significance. "That's beautiful work," Margot said, nodding toward the photo. "3 years, start to finish," Finn said, a note of pride creeping into his voice. "Found her in a junkyard outside Reno. Ethan was convinced we could bring her back." "Were you right?" "See. For yourself," Ethan said, pointing through the window to where a gleaming red Mustang sat in the parking area. "She purrs like a kitten now." Margot looked more closely at the restored car and felt her assumptions shifting. This wasn't just competent mechanical work, this was artistry. Every line was perfect, every detail considered. The paint job alone would have cost more than most people made in a year, and yet here it sat in a tiny garage in the middle of nowhere, testament to skill that most people would never recognize. "You did that here?" she asked. "With what equipment?" "Mostly hand. Tools and patience," Finn said, "and about 1,000 trips to the parts yard." "Dad's being modest," Ethan added. "He rebuilt the entire engine from scratch, bored out the cylinders, balanced the rotating assembly, custom-tuned the carburetor. That car runs better now than it did when it rolled off the assembly line." Margot found herself staring at Finn with new eyes. She'd assumed he was just a small-town mechanic who could handle basic repairs. But the Mustang spoke of capabilities that went far beyond changing oil and replacing brake pads. This was the work of someone who understood machines at a fundamental level, who could coax performance from metal and moving parts through pure skill and intuition. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked. "Learning since I could hold a wrench," Finn replied. "My grandfather started this place in 1952. My father took it over in the 70s. I guess I'm the 3rd generation to get my hands dirty here." "And you never thought about doing something else? With skills like that, you could work anywhere." Finn was quiet for a moment, and Margot sensed she'd touched on something deeper. "I tried that once," he said finally. "Went to work for a high-end restoration shop in California. Big money, famous clients, cars worth more than most people's. Houses? What happened? I learned that there's a difference between fixing things and just going through the motions. Out there it was all about billable hours and profit margins. Here," he gestured around the modest shop, "here, when Mrs. Chen's Honda won't start, it matters because that's how she gets to her job at the school. When Tommy Hernandez brings in his pickup, it matters because that truck puts food on his family's table." Ethan nodded seriously. "Dad says we don't just fix cars, we fix problems." Looking at the father and son, both covered in honest dirt and speaking about their work. With obvious passion, Margot felt something she hadn't experienced in years: respect. Not the careful deference she was used to receiving because of her wealth, but genuine respect for competence and integrity. "So," Finn said, settling into the chair behind his desk, "let's talk about your Ferrari. I can get the parts, but it'll probably take a few days. There's a motel in town if you want to wait, or I can arrange for a tow truck to take it wherever you'd prefer to have it fixed." The practical part of Margot's brain said to take the tow truck option. She had meetings to attend, deals to close, a company that couldn't run itself. But as she looked around the cluttered office with its photos of restored dreams and thank you notes from grateful customers, another part of her, a part that had been quiet for far too long, whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she needed to be. "How good is that motel?" she asked. Finn smiled, and Margot felt her heart do something it hadn't done in years. "Well," he said, "it runs honest." The Desert Bloom Motel lived up to its name in the most ironic way possible. It was a collection of faded pink adobe units, arranged around a courtyard where the only blooms were plastic flowers that had long since given up any pretense of looking real. But the air conditioning worked, the water was hot, and the elderly proprietor, Mrs. Rodriguez, had welcomed Margot with the kind of genuine warmth that money couldn't buy. "You're the lady with the fancy car," Mrs. Rodriguez had said, not with judgment, but with the matter-of-fact acceptance of someone who'd seen everything in her 70-odd years. "Finn's a good man. He'll get you sorted." That had been yesterday. Now, as Margot sat on the small patio outside her room, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, she found herself thinking less about her stranded Ferrari and more about storm-grey eyes and hands that could coax life from dead metal. She'd tried to work, pulling out her laptop and attempting to tackle the mountain of emails that had accumulated during her desert exile. But her phone still had spotty service, and every time she started to focus on quarterly projections or merger documents, her mind would drift to the sound of Finn's voice explaining the intricacies of engine rebuilding to his son. The truth was, Margot Davies hadn't taken an unscheduled break from work in over 5 years. The idea of being disconnected from her corporate empire should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something that took her a moment to identify: relief. When the breakfast hour arrived at Rosita's Diner, the only restaurant in Copper Creek, Margot found herself walking the 3 blocks from the motel, trading her usual designer heels for a pair of practical flats she'd bought at the general store. The morning air was crisp and clean, scented with sage and something sweet she couldn't identify. The diner was exactly what she'd expected. Red vinyl booths, a counter with chrome stools, and the kind of coffee that could wake the dead. What she hadn't expected was to find Finn and Ethan occupying a corner booth, sharing what appeared to be their regular breakfast ritual. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, approaching their table with a coffee cup from the counter. "Please," Finn said, standing partially as she slid into the booth across from them. The gesture was so naturally courteous that Margot felt a flutter of something she'd almost forgotten existed. Ethan looked up from what appeared to be homework spread across the table. "How'd you sleep?" The walls at the Desert Bloom are pretty. Thin. Mrs. Rodriguez's cat likes to practice opera at about 3 in the morning. "I heard that," Margot laughed, though I wasn't sure if it was a cat or someone trying to start a chainsaw. "Definitely the cat," Finn said with a grin. "Princess has been the town's unofficial alarm clock for about 10 years now." They ordered breakfast. Margot found herself asking for the same thing Finn was having, curious about his choices, and settled into the kind of easy conversation that surprised her with its naturalness. Ethan, she discovered, was 16 and working toward his junior mechanic certification while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. Finn was helping him with calculus homework, and Margot was startled to realize that the small-town mechanic was walking his son through differential equations with the confidence of someone who actually understood them. "Where did you learn calculus?" she asked. "Engineering degree from Colorado State," Finn said, as if it were no big deal. Seemed like a good idea at the time. "You have an engineering degree and you're..." Margot stopped herself, realizing how condescending she was about to sound. "Running a small-town garage?" Finn finished, his tone amused rather than offended. "Yeah, I get that reaction a lot." "I didn't mean..." "It's okay," Finn said. I know how it looks from the outside. Guy with a degree, working with his hands in the middle of nowhere, must have screwed up somewhere, right? Ethan looked up from his homework. Tell her about the bridge project, Dad. Ethan, come on, it's cool, you should hear this, Ethan said to Margot. Dad designed a bridge. Not a bridge, Finn corrected. Part of a bridge. And it was a long time ago. But Ethan was already pulling out his phone, scrolling through photos. Here, he said, showing Margot the screen, the Riverside Memorial Bridge in Colorado Springs. Dad designed the cable stay system. Margot looked at the image of a graceful span crossing a river valley, its cables arranged in a harp-like pattern that was both functional and beautiful. This is your work? Part of it, Finn said, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. I was part of a team he led, Ethan added proudly. It won some kind of engineering award. Margot studied Finn's face, seeing something she recognized, the look of someone who had walked away from one life to choose another. What made you come back here? Finn was quiet for a moment, stirring sugar into his coffee with more attention than the task required. Life happened, he said finally. Sometimes the things you think you want aren't the things you actually need. Before Margot could ask what he meant, the diner door chimed and a woman in her 30s entered, carrying a toddler on her hip. She spotted their table and made her way over with a warm smile. Finn, just the man I was hoping to see. Maria's truck is making that noise again. The whining sound or the grinding sound? Finn asked, already reaching for a napkin to jot down notes. Both, I think, plus it's pulling to the left when I brake. Bring it by this afternoon, I'll take a look. You're a lifesaver, the woman said. Then she noticed Margot and extended her free hand. I'm Carmen Valdez. You must be the lady with the Ferrari. Word travels fast in a small town, Margot said, shaking Carmen's hand, especially when it involves a car worth more than most of our houses. Carmen laughed. Don't worry, though. If anyone can fix it, it's Finn. He's like a car. Whisperer. After Carmen left, Margot found herself looking at Finn with new eyes. The easy way he'd interacted with Carmen, the obvious affection in Ethan's voice when he talked about his father's accomplishments, the respect she'd seen in other customers' faces. It painted a picture of a man who had found something more valuable than career advancement or financial success. Can I ask you something? Margot said as they walked back toward the garage after breakfast, Ethan having peeled off to catch the school bus. Shoot. Do you ever regret it? Giving up engineering? For this, Finn stopped walking and turned to face her. They were standing in front of the general store, where an elderly man was setting up a checkers game on a barrel, preparing for what was apparently a daily ritual. Do you know what I used to do? Finn asked. I designed structures that would last 100 years, maybe more. Bridges and buildings that thousands of people would use every day. Important work, meaningful work. But I was miserable. I worked 60-hour weeks in an office with no windows, came home to an empty apartment and realized I was building things that would outlast me while forgetting to build a life worth living. He started walking again, his pace unhurried. Here, I fix Mrs. Chen's Honda so she can get to work. I keep Tommy's truck running so he can support his family. I teach my son that work doesn't have to be something you endure. It can be something you love. That seems like engineering a pretty good life to me. Margot felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of truth that was both uncomfortable and liberating. I've been working 60-hour weeks for as long as I can remember, she said quietly. And how's that working out for you? She thought. About her penthouse apartment in San Francisco, beautiful and empty. Her schedule, packed with meetings and obligations that felt increasingly meaningless. Her last relationship, which had ended when her fiancé had accused her of being more married to her company than to him. Not as well as I thought, she admitted. They'd reached the garage, where Finn's restored Mustang sat gleaming in the morning sun. Margot found herself running her hand along the smooth fender, feeling the perfection of the paint job, the precise alignment of every panel. "This is extraordinary work," she said. "Really? I've seen restoration shops in California that charge 6 figures for work that isn't this good." "Thank you," Finn said, and she could hear the genuine appreciation in his voice. "That means a lot, coming from someone who clearly knows quality." "How do you know I know quality?" "Your Ferrari, for one thing. But more than that, the way you look at things, you see details. Most people just see the surface." Margot felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the desert sun. When was the last time someone had complimented her on something other than her business acumen or her net worth? "I should let you get to work," she said. "I'm sure you have other customers besides me." "Actually," Finn said, "I was wondering if you'd like to see something. The parts for your Ferrari won't be here until tomorrow at the earliest, and you seem like someone who might appreciate good craftsmanship. What did you have in mind?" Finn's smile was answer enough. As he led her toward the back of the garage, Margot realized she was more excited about spending the day with a small-town mechanic than she'd been about anything work-related in months. Maybe Carmen was right. Maybe Finn Green really was a whisperer. But it wasn't just cars he seemed to understand. It was people. What Finn wanted to show her was hidden behind the garage in a structure that could generously be called a barn, though it looked more like it had been assembled from the dreams of someone who understood that function mattered more than form. The building was a patchwork of corrugated metal, weathered wood, and what appeared to be salvaged materials from a dozen different construction projects. "It's not much to look at from the outside," Finn said, working a key into a padlock that had seen better decades. "But that's kind of the point." The doors swung open to reveal something that made Margot catch her breath. The interior was a cathedral of automotive craftsmanship, a workshop that rivaled anything she'd seen in the high-end restoration facilities of California. Every tool had its place. Every surface was organized with the precision of someone who understood that chaos was the enemy of creation. Work lights hung from the ceiling at perfect intervals, casting even illumination over workbenches that looked like they belonged in a museum. But it was the cars that truly took her breath away. A 1955 Thunderbird sat on a lift, its body stripped to bare metal and sanded to perfection, waiting for paint that would bring it back to life. In the corner, a 1969 Camaro SS gleamed under a dust cover, clearly finished and awaiting delivery. And in the center of the space, commanding attention like a piece of sculpture, sat a 1967 Shelby Cobra that looked like it could accelerate from 0 to 60 faster than most people could blink. "This is incredible," Margot whispered, walking slowly around the Cobra. Where do you find these cars?" "They find me, mostly," Finn said, running his hand along the Thunderbirds fender with the gentle touch of someone greeting an old friend. "Word gets around. People know I'll take on projects that other shops won't touch because they're too difficult, because they're not profitable enough. Most restoration shops want the easy jobs, cars that just need cosmetic work, maybe an engine rebuild. But the real rescues, the cars that are more rust than metal, that's where the challenge is. Margot noticed a bulletin board covered with before and after photos, each set telling a story of resurrection that bordered on the miraculous. Cars that had been little more than skeletal remains transformed into gleaming examples of automotive art. "How long does something like this take?" she asked, gesturing toward the Cobra. "Depends on how far gone it is when it arrives. This one took me 3 years, working nights and weekends. Found it in a field outside Bakersfield. Hadn't run since Carter was president. And now," Finn's grin was answer enough. "Want to hear it run?" Before Margot could answer, he was climbing into the driver's seat and turning the key. The engine came to life with a rumble that seemed to vibrate through her bones. A sound so pure and powerful that it made her understand why people fell in love with cars. It wasn't just transportation. It was poetry written in horsepower, and "Chrome. That's beautiful," she said when he turned off the engine. "Sarah always said cars were just horses that didn't need hay," came a voice from the doorway. They turned to see an elderly woman entering the workshop, moving with the careful steps of someone who had earned every one of her years. She was small and weathered, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and mischief. "Mrs. Patterson," Finn said, standing quickly. "I wasn't expecting you today." "Came to check on my Buick," she said, then turned to Margot with frank curiosity. "You must be the Ferrari lady." "I'm Eleanor Patterson, but everyone calls me Ellie." "Margot Davies," Margot replied, shaking the older woman's hand and being surprised by the strength of her grip. "Ellie's 1972 Skylark is over there under the blue tarp," Finn explained. "Anniversary present from her late husband. We're bringing it back to the way it looked on their wedding day." 47 years we drove that car," Ellie said, her voice carrying the weight of memory. "Every Sunday drive, every vacation, every trip to the hospital when the babies were coming. Henry always said when he was gone, I should sell it and get something practical. Shows how much he knew about women." Margot found herself drawn to the older woman's directness. "How long have you known Finn?" "Since he was knee-high to a grasshopper," Ellie replied. "Watched him grow up in this town, leave for the big city, and come back with his tail between his legs and a baby in his arms." "Ellie," Finn warned, but there was affection in his voice. "What? It's not a secret. Besides, it was the best thing that ever happened to this place. Having you come home, I mean. This town was dying before you started fixing more than just cars." Margot looked between them, sensing there was more to the story. "What do you mean?" Ellie settled onto a work stool with the air of someone preparing to tell a tale worth hearing. "When Finn came back 7 years ago, half the businesses on Main Street were boarded up. Young people were leaving for Las Vegas or Phoenix as soon as they graduated high school. We were becoming one of those places you pass through on the way to somewhere better." "But," Margot prompted, "but Finn didn't just open a garage. He started fixing the town too. Tommy Hernandez was about to lose his roofing business because his truck kept breaking down and he couldn't afford the repairs. Finn worked out a trade. Tommy fixed the roof on the garage. Finn kept the truck running. Maria Santos was a single mother trying to get her teaching degree, but her car was so unreliable she kept missing classes. Finn fixed it for free and told her she could pay him back after she got her job at the school." Finn looked uncomfortable with the praise. "It wasn't charity, it was just good business." "Good business, my foot," Ellie snorted. "You turned this place into a community again. The garage became a gathering spot. People started talking to each other, helping each other. Before you know it, Carmen opened her bakery, the Valdez family started their restaurant, and suddenly we had a reason to stay instead of just a reason to leave." Margot looked around the workshop with new understanding. This wasn't just about restoring cars, it was about restoring hope. Finn had used his skills not just to fix machines, but to weave a community back together. "Don't listen to her," Finn said, but Margot could see the pride in his eyes. People here just needed someone to believe in them, and someone to give them reliable transportation, Ellie added with a laugh. "Hard to build a community when nobody's car will start." As if summoned by the mention of community, voices began drifting in from outside. Through the open doors, Margot could see people gathering in the parking area. Carmen from the diner, a man she assumed was Tommy based on his roofing company t-shirt, and several others she didn't recognize. "What's happening?" Margot asked. Finn checked his watch and grinned. "Saturday afternoon tradition. People drop by to see what's happening in the shop, catch up on news, let their kids play in the yard out back. Usually turns into an impromptu barbecue." "Every Saturday? For about 4 years now," Ellie said. "Started when Mrs. Chen brought over tamales one day to thank Finn for fixing her car. Next week, someone else brought something. Now it's like a standing invitation. Show up when you can, bring what you want, leave when you need to. As they walked outside, Margot found herself in the middle of something she'd only read about in novels, a genuine community gathering. There was no agenda, no networking, no ulterior motives, just people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company, sharing food and conversation in the afternoon sunshine. Ethan appeared from somewhere, no longer in his school clothes, but wearing work clothes and a grin. Dad, Mrs. Chen brought her famous salsa, and Tommy's firing up the grill. Can we show Margot the project? What project? Margot asked. The community garden, a voice said behind her. She turned to see a woman in her 40s approaching with a toddler on her hip and another young one trailing behind. I'm Maria Santos. We met briefly at the diner. The school teacher, Margot remembered. That's right. And thanks to Finn, I can actually get to work reliably. Maria smiled warmly. The garden was Ethan's idea. He convinced us to turn that empty lot behind the post office into a place where everyone could grow vegetables. Finn donated the labor to till the soil and install the irrigation system. Want to see it? Ethan asked eagerly, as the informal tour group made its way down Main Street. Margot found herself swept up in the easy camaraderie of the group. There was no hierarchy here, no pecking order based on wealth or status. The school teacher's opinion carried as much weight as anyone else's, and the teenager with grease under his fingernails was treated like the valuable community member he clearly was. The garden itself was modest, but thriving. Neat rows of vegetables and herbs that spoke of careful planning and dedicated maintenance. But what struck Margot most was the sense of shared ownership, the way everyone spoke of our tomatoes and our corn, as if the success of the garden reflected the success of the community itself. This is beautiful, Margot said, meaning it. How do you coordinate everything? Who decides what gets planted where? Town meetings, Carmen said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. First Saturday of every month at the diner. Anyone who wants to has a say. Real democracy in action, Tommy added. Sometimes it gets heated. You should have heard the great squash versus zucchini debate of last spring, but we always work it out. As they walked back toward the garage, Margot felt something she hadn't experienced since college, the sense of belonging to something larger than herself. These people had welcomed her not because of who she was or what she could do for them, but simply because she was there, interested and willing to participate. When they reached the parking area, where the impromptu barbecue was now in full swing, Finn appeared at her elbow with a plate of food and a cold beer. Welcome to Copper Creek, he said quietly. Population 247 on a good day, and everyone's invited. Margot accepted the plate and looked around at the faces surrounding her, people who had built something real together, something that couldn't be bought or sold or quarterly reported. For the first time in years, she felt truly wealthy. The barbecue had wound down as the desert sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Most of the neighbors had drifted home, carrying leftover food and the satisfied tiredness that comes from an afternoon well spent. Margot found herself helping Finn and Ethan clean up, stacking chairs and gathering empty bottles with the automatic efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before, even though it was her first. You don't have to help with that, Finn said, watching her fold tablecloths with practiced precision. I want to, Margot replied, and realized she meant it. There was something satisfying about the simple act of putting things in order, of contributing to the maintenance of something good. As they worked, Ethan regaled them with stories from the afternoon. Mrs. Chen's latest attempts to set up her nephew with Carmen, Tommy's plans to expand his roofing business, the ongoing debate about whether the town needed a stop sign at the intersection of Main and Copper Streets. It's like a soap opera sometimes, Ethan said, grinning. Except everyone actually likes each other, most of the time. Finn corrected with a smile. You should have been here during the great parking dispute of 2019. What was the great parking dispute? Margot asked, genuinely curious. Someone painted parking lines in front of the diner without asking anyone, Ethan explained. Took 3 town meetings and a potluck dinner to sort it out. The casual way they talked about community conflicts and resolutions struck Margot as both foreign and appealing. In her world, disputes were settled by lawyers and contracts. Here, apparently, they were solved with conversation and casseroles. As the last of the cleanup was finished, Ethan announced he was going to Tommy's house to help with a computer problem, leaving Finn and Margot alone as the evening settled around them like a comfortable blanket. The garage was quiet now, the work bays dark, but warm light spilled from the office windows. Coffee? Finn asked. I made a fresh pot before the crowd arrived. They settled into mismatched chairs on the small porch that ran along the front of the office building, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The desert at night was a different creature than the desert at day. Cooler, quieter, filled with subtle sounds and mysterious movements that spoke of life hidden in the shadows. This is nice, Margot said, cupping her coffee mug and breathing in the sage-scented air. Peaceful. It is now, Finn agreed. Wasn't always. Something in his tone made Margot look at him more closely. In the soft light from the office, his face looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the day's work. What do you mean? Finn was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the empty street where a lone cat picked its way carefully across the asphalt. When I came back here 7 years ago, I wasn't really living. I was just existing, going through the motions. What happened? Margot asked gently. Jennifer, Ethan's mother. She died when he was 9. Cancer. Ovarian. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. His voice was steady, but Margot could hear the careful control in it. I was working in California then, putting in those 60-hour weeks I mentioned. Thought I was building a future for my family. Margot's chest tightened. I'm sorry. The thing is, I almost missed it. All of it. The diagnosis, the treatments, the end. I was so focused on climbing the corporate ladder that I nearly wasn't there when my wife was dying. He took a sip of coffee, and Margot could see his hands weren't quite steady. She made me promise toward the end, made me swear that I wouldn't let work become more important than life, that I'd raise Ethan somewhere. He could grow up knowing that people mattered more than paychecks. So you came home. Came home to a town that was dying, with a 9-year-old boy who barely spoke for 6 months, and no idea how to be a single father. Finn's laugh was bitter. My grandfather's garage was sitting empty. He'd passed the year before, and I figured I could at least keep my hands busy while I figured out what came next. Margot found herself leaning forward, drawn by the honesty in his voice. In her world, people didn't share this kind of pain with virtual strangers. But sitting here in the desert darkness, it felt natural, necessary even. That must have been terrifying, she said. It was. I had this engineering degree and all this experience with bridges and buildings, but I didn't know the first thing about helping a grieving child or running a small business or being part of a community. He gestured toward the quiet street. These people saved us, really. They adopted us, taught us how to belong somewhere. And Ethan? Finn's face softened. Ethan he's the strongest person I know. He grieved hard, but he also knew somehow that we needed to build something new together. He's the one who started reaching out to people, making friends, turning the garage into a gathering place. I was still trying to hide from the world, but he was determined to be part of it. Margot thought about the confident, cheerful teenager she'd met and felt a stab of admiration for his resilience. He doesn't seem like someone who's been through that kind of loss. Kids are remarkable that way. They feel everything, but they Also heal in ways adults struggle with. Finn paused, though he still has nightmares sometimes. Still worries that something will happen to me too. The weight of that admission settled between them. Margot could picture a young boy lying awake at night, afraid to lose the only parent he had left, and her heart clenched with unexpected emotion. "What about you?" Finn asked quietly. "What brought you to the desert, really? Because I'm guessing it wasn't just a spontaneous road trip." Margot felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of defenses she'd built so carefully over the years. Maybe it was the darkness, or the coffee, or the way Finn had just shared something so personal. Or maybe it was simply that she was tired of carrying her own pain alone. "I've been engaged 3 times, she said, the words coming out more abruptly than she'd intended. Finn waited, not pushing, just present in the way that seemed to be his gift. "The first time I was 25 and thought I knew everything. He wanted me to choose between him and my company. I chose the company." She took a shaky breath. "The second time I was 30 and convinced I'd learned from my mistakes. But he turned out to be more interested in my bank account than my heart. And the third time was 2 years ago. David was perfect on paper. Successful lawyer, came from the right family, understood the demands of my career." Margot's voice grew flat. "He proposed at a charity gala, with photographers waiting and a prenup already drafted. When I said yes, the first thing he did was start planning how my company could benefit his political ambitions. What happened? I realized I was about to marry someone who saw me as a stepping stone rather than a person. Someone who was more excited about my net worth than me." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So I ran, literally. Got in my car at dawn and started driving, trying to outrun the feeling that I'd spent my entire adult life building something that didn't actually make me happy." Finn nodded slowly. "Success without satisfaction. Exactly. I have everything I thought I wanted: money, power, recognition. But I can't remember the last time I laughed the way I did today. Can't remember the last time I felt like I belonged somewhere, or like people were glad to see me just because I was me." "Money can't buy community," Finn said gently. "No, it can't, but it can isolate you from it pretty effectively." Margot looked out at the quiet street, thinking about her penthouse apartment with its perfect views and perfect emptiness. "I've been so busy building walls to protect my wealth that I forgot to build doors to let people in." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, 2 people who had found unexpected understanding in the most unlikely place. Finally, Finn spoke. "Again, Jennifer used to say that pain was just love with nowhere to go, that the goal wasn't to stop feeling it, but to find ways to transform it into something useful. Is that what you did here? Transform your pain?" "I'm still working on it," Finn admitted. "But yeah, I think so. Every car I fix, every person I help, every Saturday afternoon like today, it's a way of honoring what I lost while building something new." Margot felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to transform anything. I only know how to build walls and make money." "Maybe," Finn said quietly, "you just need to learn that building walls and building connections require some of the same skills. You just use them in different directions." As if summoned by their conversation, Ethan's voice drifted across the darkness as he returned from Tommy's house, calling out a cheerful goodnight to someone down the street. Soon, he was climbing the porch steps, his face flushed with the satisfaction of a problem solved. "Mrs. Patterson's computer is officially unbroken," he announced. "Turns out she just needed to restart her router." "How is Mrs. Patterson with technology?" Margot asked. "About like you'd expect from someone who still calls it the Google," Ethan grinned. "But she makes the best chocolate chip cookies in 3 counties, so we forgive her." Watching the easy affection between father and son, Margot felt something she hadn't experienced in years: envy. Not for their modest circumstances or simple life, but for the obvious love and trust that existed between them. For the way they had built something meaningful from loss, something that honored the past while embracing the future. As the evening wound down and they prepared to part ways, Finn walked Margot partway back toward the motel. The desert air was cool now, filled with the scent of night-blooming cereus and the distant sound of coyotes calling to each other across the darkness. "Thank you," Margot said, as they paused under a streetlight that cast more shadows than illumination. "For what?" In telling me about Jennifer, for trusting me with that." Finn nodded. "Thank you for listening, and for trusting me with your story too." As Margot continued toward the motel alone, she found herself thinking not about the Ferrari waiting for parts, or the meetings she was missing, or the empire that was probably running just fine without her constant attention. Instead, she thought about a man who had turned grief into grace, and a community that had taught her more about real wealth in one afternoon than she'd learned in 20 years of corporate success. For the first time in her adult life, she was beginning to understand the difference between having everything and having enough. Sunday morning in Copper Creek arrived with the kind of gentle silence that only small desert towns knew how to create. Margot woke to the sound of wind chimes on her motel patio and the distant call of a roadrunner somewhere in the scrub brush behind the building. For the first time in months, she hadn't set an alarm, and the luxury of waking naturally felt almost decadent. She'd planned to use the morning to catch up on work. Her laptop had been charging overnight, and she had a stack of emails that probably required her attention. But as she sat on the small patio with coffee from the motel's surprisingly decent machine, watching the mountains catch the early light, she found herself thinking instead about storm-grey eyes and the way Finn's hands moved when he talked about engines. The truth was, Margot Davies had never been courted by anyone who didn't want something from her. Money, connections, access to her network of influential contacts. There was always an angle, always an ulterior motive hidden beneath protestations of genuine affection. But Finn seemed genuinely uninterested in her wealth, almost oblivious. Do it in a way that was both refreshing and slightly unnerving. A knock on her door interrupted her musings. She opened it to find Ethan standing on her doorstep, wearing clean jeans and a button-down shirt that made him look older than his 16 years. "Morning, Miss Davies. Dad wanted me to let you know that your Ferrari parts came in early. They're at the garage if you want to come take a look." "That's wonderful news," Margot said, though she was surprised to realize she felt more disappointment than relief. "I'll be right there." "Actually," Ethan said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, "Dad also asked if you'd like to come to church with us first. It's not far, and afterward we usually go to the Hernandez place for Sunday dinner. Mrs. Hernandez makes the best carnitas in the county." Margot blinked. When was the last time someone had invited her to church? When was the last time she'd gone anywhere that wasn't related to business or carefully orchestrated social networking? "I'd like that," she heard herself saying. "Give me 10 minutes to change." The Copper Creek Community Church was a modest adobe building that looked like it had been built by the same person who designed the town, someone who valued function over form, but wasn't opposed to beauty where it occurred naturally. The congregation was small, maybe 30 people, but the warmth in the sanctuary was palpable. Finn had saved her a seat in the third pew between himself and Ethan. As the service began, Margot found herself swept up in something she hadn't experienced since childhood: genuine community worship. There was no performance here, no ulterior motives or networking opportunities, just people gathered together to share something larger than themselves. The pastor, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes, spoke about building bridges, not just physical structures, but connections between people, communities and hearts that had been damaged by life's inevitable storms. Margot felt Finn glance at her during this part of the sermon, and she wondered if he was thinking about the literal bridges he'd once designed, or the metaphorical ones he'd built here in Copper Creek. After the service, as they walked the few blocks to the Hernandez house, Margot found herself walking between Finn and Ethan, listening to their easy banter about the upcoming week. Ethan had a calculus test on Tuesday. Finn was expecting a 1965 Corvette that needed a complete engine rebuild, and there was apparently some excitement about the arrival of a new family in town. The Washingtons have 3 kids, Ethan was explaining to Margot. Dad says Mr. Washington is a veteran who's going to start a landscaping business. Mom thinks they'll be good for the town. More kids means the school stays open, Finn added. Maria's been worried they might consolidate with the district in Vegas if enrollment drops any lower. The casual way they discussed the town's welfare, as if everyone's success was connected to everyone else's, struck Margot as both foreign and appealing. In her world, business was competition. Here, it seemed to be collaboration. The Hernandez house was a sprawling ranch-style home surrounded by a garden that looked like something from a magazine. Rosa Hernandez, Tommy's wife, greeted them at the door with the kind of warm enthusiasm that made Margot feel like family, rather than a stranger. "You must be our Ferrari lady," Rosa said, enveloping Margot in a hug that smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. "Tommy's been talking about your car all week. Come in, come in. You're just in time. The carnitas are perfect." The dining room was filled with an extended family that seemed to include anyone who showed up. Besides the immediate Hernandez clan, Tommy, Rosa, and their 3 children, there were Rosa's parents, Tommy's brother and sister-in-law, and what appeared to be several neighbors who'd been adopted for the afternoon. Margot found herself seated next to Finn, with Ethan across from her next to the youngest Hernandez child, a gap-toothed 7-year-old named Sophia, who seemed fascinated by Margot's earrings. "Are those real diamonds?" Sophia whispered loudly, causing the adults to laugh. "Sophia, that's not polite," Rosa scolded gently. "It's okay," Margot said, smiling at the child. "Yes, they are. My grandmother gave them to me." "Were you rich when you were little?" Sophia asked with the directness that only children possessed. "Sophia," Tommy said, but Margot waved him off. "No, I wasn't," she said honestly. "My family didn't have very much money when I was growing up. I had to work very hard to afford nice things." "Do you like being rich?" Sophia persisted, ignoring her parents' mortified expressions. Margot paused, considering the question seriously. "I like not having to worry about paying bills or buying groceries, but the best parts of my life lately haven't had anything to do with money." Finn caught her eye across the table and smiled, and Margot felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. As the meal progressed, Margot found herself drawn into conversations that ranged from local politics to Rosa's grandmother's secret carnitas. Recipe to a spirited debate about whether the high school football team had any chance of making the playoffs. She contributed where she could, asked questions when she was curious, and gradually relaxed into the rhythm of genuine family conversation. After dinner, while the women cleaned up and the men argued good-naturedly about football, Margot found herself helping Rosa's mother Elena wash dishes at the kitchen sink. "You're not what I expected," Elena said quietly, her English accented but clear. "What did you expect? Someone who would look down on us. Someone who would think she was too good for Sunday dinner in a small house." Margot handed her a dried plate. "I think this might be the best Sunday dinner I've ever had." Elena studied her face. "You mean that?" "I do. Where I come from, meals are usually business meetings disguised as social events. Everyone has an agenda. This is," she gestured around the warm, cluttered kitchen, "this is real. Real is all we have," Eleanor said with a smile. "But real is enough." Later, as the afternoon wound down and the extended family began to disperse, Margot found herself on the back patio with Finn and Ethan, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. The younger children were playing in the yard, their laughter mixing with the distant sound of Tommy and his brother debating carburetor settings. "This happens every Sunday?" Margot asked. "Every Sunday," Ethan confirmed. "Sometimes it's here, sometimes at someone else's house. Depends on who's cooking and who has the biggest table. It's like having a family without all the genetic obligations." Finn added, "We choose to show up for each other." Margot thought about her own Sundays, usually spent alone in her penthouse, catching up on work or attending carefully orchestrated social events where every conversation was a potential business opportunity. "I can't remember the last time I had Sunday dinner with people I actually wanted to spend time with," she admitted. "Well," Ethan said with a grin, "you're always welcome here. Fair warning, though, Mrs. Hernandez will try to feed you until you explode, and Sophia will probably ask you at least 3 more inappropriate questions." "I'm looking forward to it," Margot said, and realized she meant it completely. As they walked back toward town in the gathering dusk, Ethan running ahead to catch up with some friends he'd spotted, Margot found herself walking slower, reluctant. "For the day to end, thank you for today," she said to Finn. "For including me. Thank you for coming, for being open to it." They reached the garage, where Margot's Ferrari sat in the bay, its hood open and parts laid out on a nearby workbench, like surgical instruments awaiting an operation. "So," Finn said, "ready to see what we're dealing with?" But as Margot looked at her car, the symbol of her wealth, her success, her escape from everything ordinary, she felt an unexpected reluctance. Once it was fixed, she would have no reason to stay. She would drive back to Silicon Valley, back to her penthouse and her board meetings and her carefully controlled life. "Actually," she said, "could we look at it tomorrow? I'd rather end today. The way it is." Finn studied her face in the gathering darkness. "Perfect," he said quietly, and standing there in the desert twilight, surrounded by the gentle sounds of a community settling into evening, Margot thought he might be right. Monday morning arrived with a clarity that made the desert mountains look close enough to touch. Margot woke early, not from anxiety or obligation for the first time in years, but from genuine anticipation of the day ahead. She dressed carefully, choosing jeans and a simple blouse, clothes that would allow her to be useful rather than decorative. When she arrived at the garage, she found Finn already at work on her Ferrari, his sleeves rolled up and his attention focused entirely on the engine bay. The parts he'd ordered lay arranged on a clean workbench like instruments for a delicate surgery. "Good morning," she said, and he looked up with a smile that made her stomach flip in the most pleasant way. "Morning. Ready to see what we're dealing with?" For the next hour, Margot found herself receiving an education in automotive engineering that was both technical and oddly intimate. Finn explained each component as he worked, his hands moving with practiced precision while his voice took on the passionate tone of someone sharing something he truly loved. "See this?" he said, pointing to a section of the cooling system. "This is where the original design could have been better." German engineering is precise, but sometimes it's precise in ways that make repairs unnecessarily complicated. "Could you improve it?" Margot asked, genuinely curious. Theoretically, sure, but improving a Ferrari is like editing Shakespeare. You might make it work better, but you lose something essential in the process. Margot watched him work, noting the way he approached each task with methodical care, never rushing, never forcing anything that didn't want to cooperate. There was something meditative about his process, something that spoke of deeper principles than just mechanical competence. "You really love this work," she observed. "I love solving problems," Finn corrected. "The work is just the method." As the morning progressed, Ethan joined them, having finished his classes at the small local high school. Margot was surprised. to discover that the school day ended at noon on Mondays to allow students to help with family businesses or community projects, a level of flexibility that would have been unthinkable in her urban experience. "How's the patient?" Ethan asked, examining the Ferrari's exposed engine. "She'll live," Finn replied. "Should have her purring again by tomorrow afternoon." "That's wonderful," Margot said, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Ethan must have heard something in her tone, because he looked at her with the perceptive gaze that seemed to run in the Green family. "You don't sound excited about getting your car back." Margot hesitated, unsure how to explain the complexity of emotions she was feeling. "It's just, once it's fixed, I'll need to head back to California, back to work." "Will you miss it here?" Ethan asked with the directness of youth. "More than I expected," Margot admitted. Father and son exchanged a look that spoke of some unspoken communication. Then Finn wiped his hands on a rag and said, "Ethan, why don't you show Margot the shop while I finish this section?" As they walked through the restoration barn, Ethan pointed out details Margot had missed on her first visit. The custom tool racks Finn had built by hand, the organizational system that made even the most complex projects manageable, the wall of photos showing completed restorations with their proud new owners. But it was what Ethan didn't show her that caught Margot's attention. In the far corner of the workshop, covered by a tarp and clearly untouched for some time, sat what appeared to be another project car. "What's under there?" she asked. Ethan's expression shifted, becoming suddenly serious. "That's Mom's car." Margot felt her breath catch. "Your mother's?" "A 1969 Camaro SS. She was restoring it when she got sick. Dad hasn't touched it since." Ethan's voice trailed off. "Can I see it?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Together, they pulled back the tarp to reveal a car that was simultaneously beautiful and heartbreaking. The Camaro was maybe 60% complete, the bodywork finished and primed, the interior partially restored, the engine rebuilt but not yet installed. It was a project frozen in time, a dream interrupted by tragedy. She was going to surprise Dad with it, Ethan said quietly. It was his favorite car when he was young, and she found this one in a salvage yard in Phoenix, spent 2 years working on it in secret, learning everything she could about restoration. Margot ran her hand along the smooth primer, imagining the love and dedication that had gone into every careful repair. It's beautiful work. She was good at it, really good. Dad taught her some things, but she had natural talent. Ethan's voice carried pride mixed with sadness. She used to say that fixing broken things was just another way of showing love. Why hasn't your father finished it? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Because it was hers, her project, her surprise, her hands on every part. Dad says finishing, it would be like rewriting her love letter. Margot understood. The Camaro wasn't just a car, it was a sacred object, a tangible connection to Jennifer Green that Finn couldn't bear to alter. But looking at it sitting there, incomplete and waiting, she also saw something else, a monument to love that had become a shrine to loss. "What do you think?" she asked carefully. "About leaving it unfinished?" Ethan considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think Mom would want it to run. She wasn't the kind of person who left things half done. But I also understand why Dad can't bring himself to touch it." "Have you talked to him about it?" "A few times. He always says someday, but someday never comes." Ethan looked at her with eyes that seemed older than his years. "I think he's afraid that finishing it means letting go of her." They covered the car again and returned to the main garage, where Finn was putting the finishing touches on the Ferrari's cooling system. He looked up as they approached, and Margot could see in his face that he knew where they'd been. "Ethan showed you the Camaro," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Margot replied simply. Finn set down his tools and leaned against the workbench. "I suppose you think I should finish it." I think, Margot said carefully, that it's not my place to think anything about it. But if you want to know what I see when I look at that car, what do you see? I see someone who loved you so much that she spent 2 years learning a completely new skill just to give you something that would make you happy. And I see a project that's waiting not to be completed by someone else, but to be honored by being allowed to fulfill its purpose. Finn was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She used to talk about us driving it together, taking road trips, going to car shows. She had this whole fantasy about us being one of those couples who restored cars as a hobby. That sounds like a beautiful dream." It was, but dreams don't survive cancer. Margot moved closer, close enough to see the pain that still lived in his eyes when he talked about Jennifer. No, they don't. But sometimes they can be transformed into something else. Something that honors what was lost while still allowing for what might be possible. Like what? Like teaching your son to finish what his mother started. Like creating something that celebrates her memory instead of preserving her absence. Finn looked toward the restoration barn, then back at Margot. "You think I'm stuck? I think you're protecting something precious. But I also think Jennifer Green sounds like someone who would want her love to create joy, not paralysis." Ethan, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. "Dad, what if we worked on it together? Not to change anything Mom did, but to complete what she started, to make her dream real, even if it's different than she imagined." Finn looked at his son, and Margot could see the war playing out in his expression. Fear battling with hope. Grief wrestling with the possibility of joy. "I wouldn't know where to start," Finn said finally. "We'd figure it out," Ethan said with the confidence of youth. "And maybe," he glanced at Margot, "maybe we could have some help from someone who understands about building things." Margot felt her heart stop. "Ethan, you said you wanted to learn how to transform pain into something useful," Ethan continued, looking directly at her. "Maybe this could be a place to start." Finn straightened, and when he looked at Margot, she saw something new in his eyes. Not just attraction or friendship, but possibility. "Are you saying you'd want to stay? Help us finish Jennifer's car?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond automotive restoration. Margot thought about her life in Silicon Valley, her penthouse, apartment, the company that had defined her identity for so long. Then she thought about Sunday dinners and community gardens, and the way Finn's hands moved when he worked on something he cared about. "I'm saying," she said slowly, "that maybe it's time I learned the difference between building walls and building bridges." Finn smiled, and it was like watching the sun come up over the desert mountains. "When do we start?" Margot asked. "How about now?" Ethan said, already heading toward the restoration barn. As they followed him, Finn caught Margot's hand. "Are you sure about this? It's not just the car, it's everything. Staying here, being part of this community, dealing with a man who comes with more baggage than a luxury hotel." Margot squeezed his hand. "I've spent my whole life being sure about things that turned out to be wrong. Maybe it's time I took a chance on something that feels right." Together, they walked toward the barn where Jennifer's Camaro waited. No longer a monument to loss, but a canvas for new beginnings. The call came on Tuesday morning, while Margot was elbow deep in the Camaro's engine bay, learning the difference between a torque wrench and a socket wrench under Ethan's patient instruction. Her phone buzzed insistently from the workbench where she'd left it, the sound jarring in the peaceful atmosphere of the restoration barn. "You should probably get that," Finn said, looking up from where he was carefully examining the car's original wiring harness. "It's been ringing all morning." Margot wiped her hands on a rag, already feeling the familiar knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. She'd been successfully ignoring her phone for 3 days now, but the outside world had a way of demanding attention, whether you wanted to give it or not. The caller ID showed her assistant's name, and Margot could practically feel the stress radiating through the screen. She stepped outside to take the call, walking far enough from the garage that her voice wouldn't carry. "Rebecca, I know you're upset, but..." "Upset?" Rebecca's voice was several octaves higher than usual. "Margot, where are you?" "The board meeting. But yesterday. The Singapore investors are threatening to pull out. David Chen has been calling every hour, asking if you're having some kind of breakdown." Margot winced. David Chen was CloudVault's largest investor and not known for his patience with what he called emotional decision-making. "I'm not having a breakdown. I'm just taking some time to think." To think? In the middle of the biggest quarter we've ever had. "Margot," the Wall Street Journal called, "they want to know if the rumors about you selling the company are true." "What rumors?" "The ones that started when you missed the board meeting without explanation and haven't returned anyone's calls for 3 days. Everyone's assuming you're either dead or planning to retire." Margot closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her empire pressing down on her from 500 miles away. "I'm not dead, and I'm not retiring. I'm just..." "You're just what? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you vanished into thin air right when the company needs you most." Through the open barn doors, Margot could see Finn and Ethan working together on the Camaro, their heads bent over some technical manual, completely absorbed in the task at hand. There was something peaceful about their focus, something that spoke of work done for its own sake, rather than for quarterly projections and investor satisfaction. "Schedule a video conference for tomorrow at 2, Margot said finally. "I'll address the board's concerns then." "Tomorrow? Margot, they need to hear from you today. David Chen is talking about calling an emergency shareholder meeting. He can't do that without cause, and taking a few days off doesn't constitute cause." "I'll be available tomorrow at 2 Pacific time. Where are you?" "I can have a car there in..." "I'm exactly where I need to be," Margot said, and ended the call. When she returned to the barn, she found Finn and Ethan had stopped working and were looking at her with concerned expressions. "Everything okay?" Finn asked. "Corporate crisis," Margot said, trying to keep her tone light. "Apparently, the business world doesn't function well when people take unscheduled vacations." "How big a crisis?" Ethan asked with the directness she'd come to expect from him. Margot hesitated. She could downplay it, pretend it was just normal business stress, but looking at these two people who had welcomed her into their lives with such genuine openness, she found she couldn't lie. "Big enough that if I don't handle it carefully, I could lose control of my company." Finn set down the manual he'd been reading. "What do you need to do?" "Fly back to California, reassure investors, convince the board that I haven't lost my mind." She laughed, but there was no humor in it, which is ironic because I'm starting to think that maybe losing my mind is exactly what I need to do. What do you mean?" "I mean, I built a company that can apparently fall apart if I disappear for 3 days. I created a system where my personal worth is tied so completely to my professional performance that taking time to figure out what I actually want is seen as a sign of mental instability." Ethan frowned. "That doesn't sound very sustainable." "It's not," Margot admitted, "but it's the life I built, and now I have to decide whether to keep living it or what?" Finn asked quietly. "Or figure out what comes next." They worked in relative silence for the next few hours, but Margot could feel the tension radiating from her phone as it continued to buzz with increasing frequency. Finally, around noon, she stepped outside again to find a string of increasingly frantic messages from Rebecca, her board members, and several major investors. The most recent message was from David Chen himself. "Emergency board meeting scheduled for Thursday 9 a.m. Your presence required. Failure to attend will be considered abandonment of fiduciary duty." Margot stared at the message, feeling the familiar weight of obligation settling around her shoulders like a heavy coat. This was what her life had always been, a series of crises that demanded immediate attention, relationships that existed only in the context of business necessity, decisions made based on market forces rather than personal desires. But as she stood there in the desert sunshine, she could hear the sound of Finn and Ethan's laughter drifting from the barn, and she remembered what it felt like to be valued for who she was rather than what she could produce. When she returned to the garage, she found them both looking at her expectantly. "I have to go back," she said simply. "When?" Ethan asked. "Tonight. There's a red-eye flight from Vegas that gets me to San Francisco by morning." Finn nodded slowly. "How long will you be gone?" "I don't know." The honesty of that admission surprised her. "Maybe a few days. Maybe longer. Maybe—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Maybe forever," Finn completed quietly. "I don't want it to be forever," Margot said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "But I don't know how to untangle myself from something I spent 20 years building." "What if you didn't have to untangle yourself?" Ethan asked. Suddenly, what if you could just change the way it works? Both adults looked at him curiously. "I mean," Ethan continued, "you're the boss, right? You own the company, so couldn't you just decide to run it differently, from somewhere else?" "It's not that simple," Margot started to say, then stopped. Why wasn't it that simple? Who had made the rule that she had to be physically present in Silicon Valley to run a technology company? Who had decided that her worth as a leader was measured by her willingness to sacrifice everything else in her life? "Maybe it could be that simple," Finn said, reading her thoughts. "Maybe the only thing stopping you from changing the rules is the assumption that they can't be changed." Margot felt something shift in her chest, not the familiar panic of impending crisis, but something that might have been hope. "You think I could run Cloud Vault from Copper Creek?" "People run global companies from stranger places," Finn said. "And we do have internet here, despite what our lack of cell towers might suggest. Plus," Ethan added with a grin, "if you stayed, you could help us finish Mom's car, and Dad could teach you how to rebuild a transmission." "I don't know the first thing about rebuilding transmissions," Margot protested. "Neither did I 6 months ago," Ethan said. "But Dad's a good teacher." Margot looked at Finn, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What do you think? Could you tolerate having a workaholic tech billionaire cluttering up your peaceful desert town?" "I think," Finn said carefully, "that Copper Creek has a way of changing people, making them remember what actually matters." "And what if I can't change? What if I'm too set in my ways, too used to the corporate world?" "Then you'll figure it out as you go," Finn said simply, "same as everyone else." Margot's phone buzzed again, and she glanced at it to see another urgent message from Rebecca. But for the first time in her professional life, she didn't feel the immediate compulsion to respond. "I still have to go back," she said. "At least for now. I owe it to my employees, my investors, everyone who's counting on me to handle this properly." "I know," Finn said, "but maybe you don't have to go back as the same person who left." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe you go back as someone who knows what she actually wants, someone who's ready to build bridges instead of walls." Margot felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "What if I go back and get sucked into the old patterns? What if I can't remember why this matters once I'm surrounded by all that pressure?" Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, placing it in her palm. It was a bolt from the Camaro's original engine, worn smooth by decades of use, but still solid, still functional. "Mom used to say that the strongest parts of any machine are the ones that have been tested the most," he said. "Take this with you. When you forget why you want to come back, remember that we're here working on something that matters, and we're saving a place for you." Margot closed her fingers around the bolt, feeling its weight. Substantial but not burdensome, like a promise made of steel and intention. "I'll be back," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "We'll be here," Finn replied, and in his voice she heard not just a promise, but a prayer. As she prepared to leave for Las Vegas and the flight that would carry her back to her old life, Margot realized that for the first time in years, she was flying towards something rather than running away from it. The question was whether she would be strong enough to remember that when the corporate machinery tried to pull her back into its familiar, suffocating embrace. The CloudVault Technologies boardroom had always been Margot's fortress, 40 floors, above San Francisco, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the bay and the city she'd conquered through sheer determination and strategic brilliance. But as she sat at the head of the polished mahogany table Thursday morning, facing a room full of executives and investors whose expressions ranged from concerned to openly hostile, the space felt more like a gilded cage than a seat of power. David Chen sat directly across from her, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression carefully neutral in the way that meant he was planning something unpleasant. To his left sat Margaret Wu, the company's chief financial officer, whose loyalty Margot had always counted on, but whose face now showed the strain of trying to manage a company whose CEO had vanished for nearly a week. The other board members, venture capitalists, tech industry veterans, and major investors filled the remaining chairs with the restless energy of people who had flown in from around the world to address what they saw as a crisis. "Before we begin," David said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had built and sold 3 successful companies before his 50th birthday, "I think we all need to understand exactly where you've been, Margot, and whether you're prepared to continue leading this company with the focus and dedication our shareholders deserve." Margot had prepared for this question during the red-eye flight from Vegas, rehearsing corporate speak explanations about strategic planning and the need for periodic reflection. But sitting there in the sterile perfection of the boardroom, surrounded by people who measured her worth in stock prices and quarterly growth, she found herself thinking instead about Finn's hands covered in engine grease and Ethan's excitement about finishing his mother's dream. "I've been in Nevada," she said simply, "taking time to evaluate our long-term strategic direction." "Nevada?" Margaret's eyebrows rose. "What's in Nevada that couldn't be handled by phone or video conference?" "Perspective," Margot replied, and saw several board members exchange glances. David leaned forward. "Margot, I'm going to be direct. In the 5 days you were unreachable, CloudVault's stock price dropped 12%. The Singapore partnership is on hold pending reassurance about leadership stability. 3 of our key engineers have received competing offers because there are rumors you're planning to sell the company and retire. We need to know, are you having some kind of personal crisis that's affecting your judgment?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. In the old days, a week ago, Margot would have responded with reassurances about her commitment, promises to work harder, longer hours to prove her dedication. She would have apologized for causing concern and immediately launched into damage control mode. Instead, she found herself thinking about Sunday dinner at the Hernandez house, about the way an entire community had welcomed her not because of what she could do for them, but simply because she was there. She thought about watching Finn work with the kind of passion and precision that had nothing to do with profit margins and everything to do with the satisfaction of creating something meaningful. "You're right to be concerned," she said finally. "I have been having a personal crisis, but not the kind you think." "What do you mean?" Margaret asked. Margot stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had once felt like her kingdom and now seemed more like a beautiful prison. "I mean, I've been questioning whether the way we've built this company, the way I've built my life, is actually sustainable or healthy for anyone involved. A murmur of concern rippled around the table. David's expression hardened. "Margot," he said, his voice taking on the tone of someone addressing a confused child. "Cloud Vault Technologies employs over 3,000 people and generates billions in revenue. This isn't a lifestyle choice. It's a responsibility to shareholders, employees, and the entire ecosystem we've created." "I'm not questioning the company's importance," Margot said, turning back to face the room. "I'm questioning whether the current model, where success requires the complete sacrifice of personal relationships, community connections, and anything resembling work-life balance, is the only way to achieve that success." "What are you suggesting?" Margaret asked carefully. Margot returned to her seat, but instead of the defensive posture she would have adopted a week ago, she leaned back with the kind of calm confidence she'd learned from watching Finn approach. "Complex problems. I'm suggesting that maybe it's time to pioneer a different kind of leadership model, one that proves you can run a successful global company without sacrificing everything that makes life worth living." David's laugh was sharp and humorless. "This sounds like midlife crisis talk, Margot. Are you planning to abandon the company, to go find yourself?" "Actually," Margot said, pulling the bolt Ethan had given her from her pocket and setting it on the table, "I'm planning to run the company from Nevada." The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret stared at her as if she'd announced her intention to relocate to Mars. David's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous purple. "That's impossible," he said finally. "Why?" Because you can't run a Silicon Valley tech company from the middle of nowhere." "Says who?" Margot asked mildly. "We're a cloud computing company. Our entire business model is based on the premise that location doesn't matter as long as you have reliable internet access. But the meetings, the networking, the face-to-face relationships with investors and partners can be handled through the same technology we sell to our clients," Margot finished. "And when in-person meetings are necessary, I can travel. The difference is that my physical presence will be the exception rather than the rule." Margaret leaned forward. "Margot, I understand you might be feeling burned out, but surely there are ways to address that without such a dramatic change. We could hire additional support staff, delegate more responsibilities." "You're missing the point," Margot said, gently. "This isn't about burnout. It's about recognizing that the traditional model of corporate leadership, where CEOs are expected to sacrifice their humanity for the sake of share prices, is not only unsustainable but ultimately counterproductive." She stood again, but this time her movement was purposeful rather than restless. "I've spent the last week in a community where people have built something meaningful together, where success is measured not just by profit margins, but by how well you serve the people around you, where work and life aren't opposing forces, but complementary aspects of a well-lived existence." "That's very philosophical," David said dryly, "but this is a business, not a commune. And I'm proposing to run that business better, not abandon it," Margot replied. "I'm talking about modeling the kind of work-life integration that our own employees desperately need, about proving that innovation and leadership can flourish outside the traditional corporate pressure cooker." She pulled out her laptop and opened a presentation she'd worked on during the flight. "I've spent the past day developing a transition plan. We'll maintain headquarters here, but I'll operate primarily from Nevada, coming to California for essential in-person meetings and quarterly board sessions. We'll invest in upgraded video conferencing technology and implement flexible work policies that allow key personnel to work remotely when appropriate." "This is insane," David muttered, but Margaret was studying the presentation with professional interest. Actually, Margaret said slowly, there's precedent for this. Twitter's Jack Dorsey split his time between companies and locations. Several major CEOs have operated successfully from non-traditional bases. Those weren't the same circumstances, David protested. You're right, Margot said. They weren't. This is an opportunity to pioneer something new, to prove that 21st century. Leadership doesn't have to be trapped in 20th century assumptions about presence and control. The debate that followed was intense and sometimes heated. David threatened to call for a vote of no confidence. Two of the other investors expressed serious concerns about the precedent this would set. But as Margot presented her detailed transition plan, explaining how remote leadership could actually enhance rather than diminish her effectiveness, she saw something shift in the room. It wasn't unanimous support. That would take time. But it was the beginning of understanding that maybe, just maybe, she was proposing something worth trying. The meeting ended with a compromise. A 6-month trial period during which Margot would split her time between Nevada and California and quarterly reviews to assess the impact on company performance. If the arrangement proved successful, they would consider making it permanent. As the board members filed out, some shaking their heads in bewilderment and others engaging in animated conversations about the implications of remote leadership, Margaret lingered behind. What's really going on, Margot? She asked. This isn't just about work-life balance, is it? Margot picked up the bolt from the table, feeling its familiar weight. No, it's not. It's about remembering that the point of building something successful is to create the freedom to live the life you actually want. And I've finally figured out what that life looks like. It involves Nevada, Margaret observed. It involves a lot of things, but yes, Nevada is part of it. Margaret smiled. Well, for what it's worth, I think you might be onto something. This company has been successful, but it's also been brutal on everyone involved. If you can prove there's a better way, that's the plan, Margot said. As she gathered her things and prepared to catch the next flight back to Las Vegas, Margot felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The anticipation of going home. Not to a penthouse apartment filled with expensive furniture and professional achievements, but to a small desert town where people fixed broken things and built communities and measured success by the depth of their connections rather than the size of their bank accounts. She pulled out her phone and sent a simple text to Finn. Coming home. Save room for me at the workbench. His response came back immediately. Room's been saved since you left. For the first time in her professional life, Margot Davies was flying toward her future rather than running from her past. And that future, she realized, looked absolutely perfect. 3 months later, Margot woke to the sound of desert wind chimes and the distant rumble of Finn's pickup truck pulling into the garage parking lot. She stretched in the queen-sized bed of what had once been the Desert Bloom Motel's honeymoon suite and was now her permanent residence, at least until the small adobe house she'd purchased on the outskirts of town was finished being renovated. The transformation of her life had been both more dramatic and more natural than she'd expected. The penthouse in San Francisco sat empty now, officially on the market, but really just a symbol of a life she'd outgrown. Her belongings had been whittled down to what actually mattered: a few pieces of meaningful furniture, her grandmother's jewelry, and enough professional wardrobe for video conferences and quarterly trips to California. Cloud Vault Technologies, contrary to David Chen's dire predictions, was thriving under her remote leadership model. The company's productivity had actually increased as Margot learned to delegate more effectively and trust her team to handle day-to-day operations without constant oversight. The stock price had not only recovered, but reached new highs as investors responded positively to what the business press was calling the Nevada experiment, a new model of corporate leadership that prioritized sustainable success over unsustainable growth, but the real measure of success wasn't in quarterly reports or stock prices. It was in moments like this one, as Margot, dressed in jeans and a work shirt, preparing to spend her morning in the restoration barn, working on Jennifer's Camaro, alongside the man she'd come to love and the teenager who'd become like family too. The Camaro project had become the backbone of their deepening relationship. Every evening after Finn finished his regular repair work and Margot completed her corporate obligations, the three of them would gather in the barn to work on the car that had become a symbol of healing, hope, and the power of shared purpose. Margot had learned more about engines and transmissions in 3 months than she'd learned about anything in years. But more importantly, she'd learned about the satisfaction that came from working with her hands, from creating something tangible and lasting, from being part of a project that honored the past while building toward the future. Morning, sunshine. Finn called as she entered the garage office where he was reviewing the day's appointment schedule over his usual black coffee. Morning, she replied, stealing a quick kiss before pouring her own cup from the pot he'd made fresh. How does today look? Busy, but manageable. Mrs. Patterson's Skylark needs new brake pads. Tommy's bringing his truck in for an oil change, and we've got that 1965 Mustang arriving from Phoenix for a full restoration. The one that's been sitting in someone's barn for 30 years. That's the one. Should be an interesting challenge. Margot had been amazed to discover that Finn's reputation as a restoration specialist had spread far beyond Copper Creek. Cars arrived regularly from Las Vegas, Phoenix, and even California, brought by collectors who'd heard about the small-town mechanic who could resurrect automotive dreams with the patience of a master craftsman. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd built a global technology company while he'd built a reputation for excellence, one satisfied customer at a time. Both approaches worked, but his seemed infinitely more sustainable and personally fulfilling. "And tonight?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk that had somehow become her chair over the past months. "Tonight, we install the Camaro's new carburetor. Ethan's been studying the manual all week." The mention of the carburetor made Margot smile. It represented a milestone in their restoration project. The moment when Jennifer's car would finally be ready for its first startup in over 8 years. They'd been working toward this moment methodically, carefully, with the kind of attention to detail that ensured everything would be perfect when the time came. "Is he nervous?" Margot asked. "Terrified," Finn admitted with a grin, "but in a good way. He wants everything to be perfect for his mom." The way Finn talked about Jennifer had evolved over the months they'd worked together. The sharp edge of grief had softened into something more like gentle remembrance, and he'd begun sharing stories that celebrated her life rather than mourning her death. Margot had learned that Jennifer had been funny, stubborn, incredibly handy, with anything mechanical, and possessed of an infectious laugh that could fill a room. More importantly, she'd learned that honoring Jennifer's memory didn't require Finn to remain frozen in the past. It meant carrying the best of what they'd shared forward into whatever came next. "Speaking of Ethan," Margot said, "has he decided about the scholarship applications?" The teenager's academic excellence hadn't gone unnoticed. 3 universities had already offered him full scholarships, including Colorado State's engineering program, the same one his father had attended. But Ethan was torn between the opportunities that lay beyond Copper Creek and his reluctance to leave the community that had shaped him. "He's still thinking," Finn said. "Part of him wants to study engineering, follow in the family tradition. But another part of him wants to stay here, take over the garage eventually. And what do you want? I want him to choose based on what will make him happy, not what he thinks he owes to me or his mother or this town." Finn's expression grew thoughtful, though I have to admit, the idea of him staying and eventually taking over the business is appealing. There's something to be said for continuity. For roots. Margot nodded, understanding the complexity of the decision. She'd been thinking about continuity and roots herself lately, about what it meant to build something lasting in a place that mattered, which brought her to the conversation she'd been planning to have with Finn for weeks now. Speaking of the future, she said carefully, I've been thinking about something. Oh, about expanding. Not the garage necessarily, but related ventures. Finn raised an eyebrow. What kind of related ventures? Margot pulled out a folder she'd been carrying and spread its contents across his desk. The papers showed architectural drawings, business plans, and financial projections for what she'd been calling the Copper Creek Center for Automotive Arts. It would be part restoration facility, part educational center, part community space, she explained, watching his face as he studied the drawings. We could offer classes in automotive restoration, host car shows, provide workshop space for people who want to work on their own projects but don't have the facilities. Finn looked through the plans carefully, his expression unreadable. This is a big operation. It would be big enough to attract visitors from across the Southwest, bring tourism revenue to the town, create jobs for people who want to stay in Copper Creek instead of leaving for the cities. And you'd fund this? I'd be the primary investor, yes, but it would be a real business, not charity. The numbers work. I've had my best financial analysts review everything. Finn was quiet for a long moment, and Margot felt her stomach clench with nervousness. They'd never really talked about the vast difference in their financial resources, and she was suddenly worried that she'd overstepped, that he might see this as her trying to buy her way into his life or change something that was already perfect. What would my role be? He asked finally. Whatever you wanted it to be. You could run the restoration side, teach classes, oversee the technical aspects, or you could just keep doing what you're doing now while the center operates alongside your existing business. And if I said no, then we'd forget the whole idea and keep working on cars in your barn, Margot said immediately. This is only interesting to me if it's something we build together. Finn studied the plans again, then looked up at her with an expression she'd learned to recognize, the same look he got when he was working through a particularly complex mechanical problem. There's one thing missing from these plans, he said. Margot's heart sank. What? Living space. If we're going to build something this big, something this important to the community, then the people running it should live here full-time, not in a motel room, no matter how nicely renovated. It took Margot a moment to understand what he was saying. When she did, her breath caught. Are you suggesting we build a house? Together? Together? I'm suggesting, Finn said, standing and coming around the desk to take her hands, that maybe it's time we stopped thinking about this as temporary. Maybe it's time we started planning a future that assumes we're going to be together for the long haul. Margot felt tears spring to her eyes. Is that what you want, the long haul? Margot Davies, Finn said, his voice soft but certain. I've been in love with you since the day you insisted on helping wash dishes at the Hernandez house instead of sitting around being served like visiting royalty. I want whatever kind of future you're willing to build with me, even if it involves ambitious restoration centers and quarterly board meetings and a girlfriend who's still learning the difference between a Phillips head and a flathead screwdriver. Especially if it involves all of that, Finn said, and kissed her with the kind of certainty that made promises unnecessary. As they stood there in the small office that had become the center of her new world, Margot realized that she'd finally found what she'd been searching for her entire adult life. Not just success, but significance. Not just achievement, but belonging. Not just a career, but a calling. And if the rumble of engines and the scent of motor oil were going to be the soundtrack and perfume of her happily ever after, she couldn't think of anything more perfect. 6 months later, on a perfect October morning when the desert air carried the crisp promise of winter, and the mountains stood sharp against a sky so blue It hurt to look at. Margot Davies found herself standing in the restoration barn wearing a white silk dress that would have cost more than most people's cars. Watching Finn Green adjust his tie with hands that still carried traces of engine grease under the fingernails. It wasn't the wedding anyone might have expected for a billionaire tech CEO, but it was exactly the wedding Margot had dreamed of once she'd learned what dreams actually worth having looked like. The barn had been transformed with string lights and wildflowers, creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and authentic. The guest list included everyone who mattered, the entire population of Copper Creek, her key employees who'd flown in from California, Finn's engineering colleagues from Colorado, and a handful of family members who'd overcome their initial bewilderment at Margot's dramatic life change to embrace the joy that radiated from her like sunlight. But the real centerpiece of the celebration wasn't the flowers or the lights or even the bride and groom. It was Jennifer's Camaro, now fully restored and gleaming in the center of the barn like a work of art. The car they'd finished together had become more than a project. It was a symbol of healing, of love that transcended loss, of the possibility that broken things could be made whole again. "You look beautiful," Finn said, taking her hands in his as Pastor Martinez began the ceremony. "You look pretty good yourself," Margot replied, thinking that she'd never seen anything more handsome than this man in his simple black suit, surrounded by the tools and dreams that defined his world. The ceremony itself was brief and heartfelt. Pastor Martinez spoke about the foundation of strong relationships being built on shared values, mutual respect, and the commitment to grow together rather than apart. Ethan served as best man, grinning with pride as he handed over the rings. Simple gold bands that Finn had crafted himself in the garage's metalworking shop, but it was the moment when they exchanged vows that would stay with everyone present for years to come. "Margot," Finn said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "6 months ago you were a stranger whose car broke down at exactly the right moment. Today, you're the woman who taught me that it's possible to honor the past while embracing the future. To love what I've lost without being afraid to love what I've found." He paused, looking out at the gathered community before continuing. "You've shown me that success isn't about building walls to protect what you have, but about building bridges to share it with others. You've made our small town bigger without making us lose what makes us special. And you've reminded me every day that the best things in life are worth waiting for, worth working for, and worth choosing over and over again." Margot felt tears, threatening as she spoke her own vows. "Finn, when my Ferrari broke down on Highway 93, I thought I was having the worst day of my professional life. I had no idea I was actually having the best day of my entire life." She looked around at the faces surrounding them, people who had become family, who had taught her what community really meant, who had welcomed her not because of what she could offer, but because of who she chose to be among them. "You taught me that real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or stock prices, but in Sunday dinners and Saturday afternoons, and the knowledge that when you come home, people are genuinely glad to see you. You showed me that love isn't about finding someone who fits into the life you've already built, but about building a life together that's better than anything either of you could create alone." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "I promise to choose you every day, in small moments and big decisions, in the restoration barn and the boardroom, in grease-stained overalls and designer dresses. I promise to remember that the most important bridges we'll ever build are the ones that connect our hearts to each other and to this community we both love." When Pastor Martinez pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the gathered crowd could probably be heard in Las Vegas. Ethan whooped loud enough to wake the dead. Mrs. Patterson dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief that had seen at least 3 generations of Copper Creek weddings, and Tommy Hernandez fired up the Camaro's engine, filling the barn with the rumble of perfectly tuned American muscle. The boom. Reception that followed was exactly what Margot had hoped for. A celebration that felt like the world's best block party. Carmen had outdone herself with a feast that combined traditional Mexican cuisine with comfort food classics. Mrs. Chen had made enough tamales to feed a small army, and Rosa Hernandez's tres leches cake was so perfect it made people weep with joy. But it was during the dancing, as a local country band played on a makeshift stage and couples swayed under the string lights, that the evening's most memorable moment occurred. David Chen, who had flown in from San Francisco with a mixture of curiosity and professional obligation, approached Margot as she took a break from the dance floor. "I have to admit," he said, gesturing around the transformed barn, "this isn't what I expected when you said you were getting married in Nevada." "What did you expect?" Margot asked, genuinely curious. "Something at the Bellagio, maybe, or a destination. Wedding in Napa, something that matched the image of the Margot Davies I thought I knew. And what do you think of the Margot Davies you actually know?" David was quiet for a moment, watching as Finn spun Ethan's girlfriend around the dance floor, while the teenager laughed with unguarded joy. "I think she's found something I didn't know was possible." "What's that?" "A way to be successful without being miserable." He paused. "The quarterly reports don't lie, Margot. CloudVault has never been more profitable or innovative. But more than that, your team has never been happier. The remote work policies, the flexible schedules, the emphasis on work-life integration, it's changing how people think about what success looks like." Margot smiled. "It turns out that when you stop treating your employees like machines and start treating them like human beings, they do better work." "Revolutionary concept," David said dryly. Then his expression grew more serious. "I owe you an apology. I thought you were having a breakdown when you disappeared to Nevada. I had no idea you were having a breakthrough." Before Margot could respond, Finn appeared at her elbow, offering her his hand. "Sorry to interrupt, but I believe I owe my wife a dance." "Your wife," Margot repeated, liking the sound of it. "That's going to take some getting used to." As they moved onto the dance floor, surrounded by friends and family and the warm glow of community celebration, Margot found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she'd been alone in a penthouse, successful but empty, wealthy but poor in all the ways that mattered. Now she was Mrs. Finn Green, co-owner of a restoration business that was already attracting customers from across the Southwest, living in a small adobe house they'd renovated together, part of a community that had taught her the difference between being important and being valued. "No regrets?" Finn asked as they swayed to a slow song that the band played just for them. "Only one," Margot said. "What's that?" "That it took me so long to get lost enough to find my way here." Finn spun her around, and as she came back into his arms, Margot caught sight of Jennifer's Camaro gleaming in the corner of the barn. Tomorrow, they would drive it to the lake for their honeymoon, a weekend camping trip that would cost less than a single night in the five-star hotels where she used to vacation but would be infinitely more valuable. "What are you thinking about?" Finn asked, following her gaze. "Just everything. How perfect this is, how right it feels. Even the part where you married a small-town mechanic who still doesn't entirely understand what cloud computing is. Especially that part," Margot laughed. "Though I should mention that Mrs. Chen asked me today if we're planning to have kids soon. Apparently the town is hoping for the next generation of green mechanics." Green mechanics. Finn's eyes lit up with a warmth that made Margot's heart skip. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her we're still figuring out how to be married, but that we're definitely open to expanding the family business." "The family business," Finn repeated thoughtfully. "I like the sound of that." As the evening wound down and the last guests began to drift home, carrying leftover cake and promises to see each other at church on Sunday, Margot and Finn stood together in the doorway of the barn, looking out at their town, their home, their future. "You know what the best part is?" Margot said, leaning against her husband's shoulder. What's that? Tomorrow, we get to wake up and do it all again. Build things together, fix what's broken, be part of something bigger than ourselves. Sounds like a pretty good life, Finn said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Sounds like the perfect life, Margot corrected. And as they turned off the lights and locked the barn, walking hand in hand toward the adobe house where they would build their tomorrow together, Margot Davies Green realized that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the most ordinary moments. A broken car, a stranger's kindness, and the courage to let someone see who you really are beneath all the armor you've spent a lifetime building. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate across the desert, and the sound carried on the wind like a blessing, like a promise, like the first note of a song that would last the rest of their lives. The Ferrari, incidentally, now sat in their garage next to Finn's pickup truck, no longer a symbol of escape, but of arrival. Because sometimes the best journey you can take is the one that finally brings you home. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.